This message comes from Sony Pictures Classics with Eleanor the Great. June Squibb shines in Scarlett Johansson's directorial debut, a moving, funny, and unexpected tale about truth, loss, and second chances. Eleanor the Great, only in theaters September 26th.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Here's a little fact about me. I have always wanted to be 37. It has been my dream age since I was a kid. I'd be an adult, I'd be living my own life, and hooray for me, I've made it. But as I'm finishing up 37, something else is looming around the corner.
Menopause is technically the date you stop having your period. So it's kind of like you can't really know when that is until about a year later. So perimenopause is the kind of hormonal adjustment period leading up to that.
Perimenopause. Hot flashes, mood swings, night sweats. They'll be on their way in the next few years, and that kind of freaks me out. Because, look, I grew up in a family where my mom talked pretty openly about her experience with perimenopause and menopause. And yet, I still don't feel like I have a full picture of what to expect. Because our culture rarely talks about it. It's like after a certain age, women's health disappears from public discourse. And that's despite the fact that approximately 2 million women in the U.S. go through perimenopause each year. So I needed some answers about what life during and after perimenopause could look like. And luckily, my very sciencey friends at Radiolab had some answers.
Hey, Brittany. Thanks for having us.
We're here today to talk about menopause, perimenopause.
All the words.
All the words. But the answers came from an unexpected place. The non-human members of the animal kingdom.
For a long time, they thought it was only humans that went through menopause. And then they discovered that orcas and a handful of toothed whales also go through menopause.
Today, I'm sitting down with Heather Radke, writer and contributing editor at Radiolab, and Molly Webster, Radiolab's senior correspondent, to figure out what animals can teach us about the mysteries of perimenopause and life thereafter. So perimenopause, it might feel pretty imminent for us, but I'm wondering, what made you think to look at other species to get these answers around the mystery that is menopause?
I feel like I am always curious about how we sort of fit into the animal kingdom. And I think I'm always in my life looking for kind of mentors of various kinds, representation in history or in nature. And I just saw this article in the Times a couple of years ago now that was about chimpanzees and menopause. And pretty immediately, the thing I realized that was super interesting is that for a long time, scientists thought only humans went through menopause. That really surprised me because I guess I just assumed, in the way that we maybe do as humans, assume everyone's just like us.
And what did you hope to learn by exploring how menopause shows up in animals?
So that article set out sort of what we ended up reporting, which is that for a long time, they thought it was only humans that went through menopause. And then they discovered that orcas and a handful of toothed whales also go through menopause. And I think each of those discoveries has told us something about what is life, in some sense, for after reproduction ceases. I didn't even fully know that was my question going in, but as we went down the road of learning more and more about this, I think I have become very interested in and was very moved by how each of these different animals, including the human animal, do something different with this period of their life where their bodies are no longer able to reproduce. The point is to make more of your species. And so when you stop doing that, it's actually quite unusual that an animal would live a long time after that.
That's really interesting because humans do continue living on after menopause, but I think that there still is this outdated outdated assumption that when a woman experiences menopause, she has a cultural death of some kind. If you follow the traditional path, right? A woman gets married, she raises kids. And that's kind of where the story ends culturally, despite most women living long after they have kids, for decades. But speaking of orcas, we learned about this orca named Granny, great name, who lived at least into her late 80s, possibly longer. She was discovered to be thriving decades after she stopped having kids. You know, she's the matriarch of her pod. She still has all this knowledge about hunting and survival. Talk to me about how Granny's postmenopausal lifestyle taught you what this period in life could look like for humans.
Yeah, so Granny was R.I.P. Granny.
R.I.P.
She was an amazing matriarch. And Granny is kind of, you know, for people who think about menopause, she's like the stand-in for this theory called the grandmother theory, which is that
hypothesis, just to fact check us. Only because they're still questioning it.
Like, clearly, that's sort of the point of our episode. So one hypothesis about why some animals have this long post-reproductive lifespan is that having these older matriarchs that are available to help take care of the youngest generation, grandmother them, that actually helps the survival of the young. And for a long time, that was kind of the predominant hypothesis for why some animals have long post-reproductive lifespans. But Granny also like does more than just grandmother. She also does all this other stuff. Like you pointed out, she's looking for fish. She's breaking up fights between the young males who are sort of competing for reproductive mates. So she's like literally helping her pod to survive. And in one way, it's like such an exciting way to think about post-reproductive life.
Molly, as you were learning about this, how did this grandmother hypothesis hit you?
Well, I think that like culturally, there's a very mapped out way of how human female might live their lives, right? It's like, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to meet someone, I'm going to have kids, I'm going to get a house, and then eventually all those kids will go away. And after that, the only picture I think many people have is being a grandmother. And so I think seeing the grandmother hypothesis in like a sciencey way is interesting in one regard because it's such a full model of like, you're a hunter, you're a caretaker, you're the knowledge basin. But then for me, I was thinking, oh, this just sort of plays into all of these ideas that we have, or like the lack of ideas that we have about what this like post reproductive moment in a human female's life is supposed to be like. And then Heather surprised us with more.
I do want to touch on that for a moment. I mean, to your point, Molly, there's a lot that's really beautiful about Granny's journey. And even like Lucy Cook, the author with a background in zoology that you all spoke to, she responded to this story thinking about her value as her wisdom and her brain and what she can teach other people. She found that empowering and she wanted to be more orca, right? And I could see why. There's a lot of fulfilling stuff going on in Granny's life. But also, to your point, Molly, like this idea of needing to be useful, or that life after menopause is just a continuation of, you know, a different kind of mothering that can make people feel kind of like one-dimensional. Like caretaking is
it.
Yeah, like it's it. It's a woman's only real purpose.
Yeah.
But offering an alternative vision in your episode was author Caroline Paul, who wrote this book called Tough Broad. And it's about, you know, outdoor adventure and aging. And Caroline is postmenopausal, and she talked to a lot of really cool older women about menopause and about aging for her book. And she had some really great insights on all the different ways of life during and after menopause and how they can look. What stood out to you in that conversation?
So much stood out to me. I mean, you know, she had spent all this time interviewing different women who were having these largely physical adventures. Now, that is like not my deal. So,
same. Don't worry.
But I think it's like a very nice stand-in for the bigger question that we're asking here, which is like, what can this part of life be for? And why have we had such a limited imagination about it? So one point Caroline made is that physically there's a kind of trope about older women that you're declining in a lot of ways, like you're aging, you're moving towards death. And so therefore you need to be more careful. But she goes out and finds all these women who are having a variety of kinds of physical adventures that are pushing them to see themselves and this part of life in just like a totally new light. And I was staying with my parents when we were making this story, and I was having these conversations with my mom at the same time. And I really realized that like I did actually have a lot of models for what postmenopausal life could look like. And I just maybe wasn't seeing them, even though they were like literally like in my home with me while I was making the story.
That's hilarious.
You know, like old friends of my mother's who helped to like parent me when I was younger, you know, just like women who are doing really different, exciting things with this part of life, doing stuff that they always wanted to do, or finding a part of themselves that they kind of never let themselves see, in part because of this idea that they had to be caretakers during the first half of their life. So I think Caroline really opens up the question of what might be possible in this part of life if you like allow your imagination to be as big as it can be.
In a way, actually reminded me of like pregnancy or something, where when you're pregnant, you get like a lot of warnings about like what not to do. Don't eat this, don't do that. It's like kind of very specific things that you should be on guard for. And I feel like the messaging on social media and stuff right now is that in this sort of post-menopausal existence, there's sort of these things to be on guard for. Basically, all of that misses the message of like, there's other things, there's also stuff you can embrace and you can live fully.
Right. I think there's this thing too that maybe you can even live more fully than you've ever lived. Maybe it's not just a good part of life. Maybe it's actually the best part of life. And that's like a really fun reframe. And just one other thing I'll say that I think is kind of worth pointing out that Caroline pointed out, which is like men actually do have quite a few models.
Even for like the average man, right? You have a midlife crisis. You could buy a sports car. You could chase younger women. You could become the boss, right? You assume power, I think, as an older man. And those narratives don't really exist for women in the same way. But, you know, as both of you have pointed out, and I think as Caroline kind of put it, where there is a vacuum of narrative, there also kind of lies opportunity. To that point, Caroline's vision of postmenopausal life, it reminded me of the book All Fours by Miranda July. Have either of you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, at one point in the book, the main character goes to a doctor's appointment and talks to her doctor and is told that postmenopausal women usually experience better mental health than at any time in their lives other than childhood. And that's not something she just made up for the novel. That is backed by science. Why do you think that is?
Well, if I can just jump in on like a science front, it's
Go
like
for it.
Your hormones have stabilized. I mean, really the roller coaster ride that we're on as females every month is huge. Like if it's cycled out on a graph, it is big waves. And female reproductive hormones affect every part of your body. It affects your stomach, your digestion, your brain. And so those things are then going to affect your moods. And so if that stuff stabilizes or at least changes less, you have more of a balanced every day. And I think about it like, remember life before puberty? No, but I also remember it being kind of chill.
Yeah.
And then I think, oh, this is so crazy. In a sense, it's like we're going through a second puberty. And remember how gargantuan that one was? And like the huge shift that happened from beginning to end. And also probably how many people like dreaded the idea of like, oh my God, I'm going to get my period and have all of these hormones. And now we're like dreading the idea of like, oh my God, I'm not going to have my period. And then I'm not going to have all these hormones.
I'm actually not dreading that.
Yeah, me neither.
But no, it's true. It seems scary and unknowable and like looming.
And again, all of these hormones are very powerful. For Heather mentioned this, how you feel attached to people affects your adrenaline, cortisol, all of these things. And so if you change hormones in your body, it's going to change the way you feel and less of a, for some people, it's going to be less of a roller coaster.
Yeah. And one of my interests in this is because I'm beginning to research a book about pre-adolescent girlhood. So what was it like before we all went through puberty? And there's a certain kind of wildness and freedom that I think a lot of girls feel, not all, but a lot. And there's this beautiful Simone de Beauvoir quote. I can't ever quite get it because it's obviously in French originally, but it's talking about girlhood. And she describes it as the time when we were still subject unto ourselves before we were objects unto others. And I think that's part of the way that postmenopausal life and that time in girlhood, they kind of rhyme with each other because there is a kind of freedom from a certain kind of objectification and not being seen in the same way, like the way that Caroline's talking about. There is a kind of freedom and we find our subjectivity in a new way in a postmenopausal moment.
Coming up,
And that this sort of third act of life, which is postmenopausal, I think it's largely been framed as the end. But I think the reframe is it's a new chapter, and it's a kind of thrilling one, largely because it's been unwritten.
Stick around.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Betterment. Don't just imagine a better future. Start investing in one with Betterment. Betterment helps people and small businesses put their money to work by automating to make saving simpler, optimizing to make investing smarter, and building innovative technology backed by financial experts. So be invested in yourself. Be invested in your business. Be invested in better with Betterment at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed. This message comes from Focus Features. Don't miss Focus Features Anemone, starring 3-time Academy Award winner Daniel Day-Lewis in his long-awaited return to the big screen. It's the most anticipated performance of the year. Anemone tells the story of two brothers wrestling with their past and the one secret that has kept them apart for decades. Featuring Daniel Day-Lewis, Sean Bean, and Samantha Morton. Anemone, directed by Ronan Day-Lewis. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent. Only in theaters October 3rd.
This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
One of the other things that I was talking about with our producer, Lennon, when we were preparing for this episode was how a lot of times there's a vision of saleability. Like you have to be able to sell something in order for a human experience to become culturally valid. And when I think about a woman being in the later part of her life, a lot of the social pressures that are very often also used to sell us things, they don't really apply anymore. If you can't really sell something to somebody in a specific demographic, it can render them culturally invisible.
I mean, I actually think one of the reasons menopause has become more talked about is because they figured out how to sell it.
Oh, I want to talk about this. I've been seeing celebrities like Halle Berry, Naomi Watts selling perimenopause or menopause solutions, products and care lines. Mm-hmm. I can see why people would want these solutions because, it can be a very frustrating time. I can also see why someone might think it's a good idea to start a company selling solutions, right? Because they're like, oh, I wanted this when I was going through this time. So now I can provide it for others.
Some of the symptoms and things are pretty brutal. And I think the counter effect to never talking about this stuff is there's not like a lot of research or solutions or anyone trying to help support you through it. So it's nice in a way to have those things starting to crop up. It's really interesting to me seeing so much articles blowing up on different magazines or websites. Like some of the most read articles are about menopause.
Yeah.
And there's a real hunger. Clearly, there are people whose attention is pulled towards the topic. And I think that reflects a cultural need and a real research need. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing right now, at least on the social front, is stuff that's this terrible thing was happening to me and I want to save you from the terrible thing. And so here's my solution. And I would love some framing that's not coming from all of a place of negativity culturally. I want someone to say I'm beginning, or, hey, this crazy symptom happened to me and I really liked it. Surely someone's out there and they're just oh my God, things have quieted down for me in a way that feels great. I don't know. I
mean, it's not perimenopause, but it's menopause. I mean, that's sort of Caroline's point, is what she describes is on the other side of when the perimenopause had sort of done its thing. She describes feeling so free and it is the beginning of something. And that this sort of third act of life, which is postmenopausal, I think it's largely been framed as the end. But I think the reframe is it's a new chapter, and it's a kind of thrilling one, largely because it's been unwritten in culture.
It seems like the discoveries that the researchers in your episode made really impacted them. I want to know, as people who are coming upon their own perimenopausal journeys, how did all of this impact you? And how are you feeling about this upcoming phase in your life?
I guess I think it just reminded me that we just don't have like a full picture of things often, either as individuals or as a large group. I don't know that we hold multiple possibilities well in our brains. We sort of pick an idea and like hold on to it, and then it gets repeated bigger and bigger and bigger. And so coming into this thing where in a way, humans and their whale and chimp brethren felt sort of unique and special for going through something like menopause and then having this like expansive time afterwards. There was like a uniqueness to it, and also made me think about, I don't know, I have 3 older sisters and we never talk about this stuff. And so there's a way in which like things are still really quiet, like people aren't out here talking about life to come. And so I think it just reminds me that my body, my brain has been through big changes before. And this is another one. And I don't know what it will be like going through it. And I don't know what lies on the other side, but it will probably be okay.
This story has made me start to really think and imagine in a much more expansive way than I probably would have otherwise this next stage of my life. And to also see all these women I already know who are already living these like fascinating, strange, complex, beautiful lives around me that like I also had just like not thought to look at that way. There's something about seeing the multiple possibilities and then making myself see how they already are all there that feels really expansive and kind of thrilling. Like maybe it could be the best era yet,
Oh my gosh. Heather, Molly, thank you both so much. This is a really great conversation. I'm feeling so optimistic and ready for the future.
Amazing.
It's such a thrill to be here. Thank you for having us.
That was writer and contributing editor at Radiolab, Heather Radke, and Radiolab senior correspondent, Molly Webster. And I'm going to put on my influencer hat for a second and ask you to please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Click follow so you know the latest in culture while it's still hot. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Lennon Sherburne,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll & Branch. Turn your bed into a sanctuary this fall with their buttery, breathable bedding. Enjoy 15% off your first set of sheets at BOLL&branch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply. Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Online. Is your child asking questions on their homework you don't feel equipped to answer? IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid, no matter the age or personality. One subscription gets you everything. One site for all the kids in your home, pre-K to 12th grade. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And NPR listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll & Branch. Turn your bed into a sanctuary this fall with their buttery, breathable bedding. Enjoy 15% off your first set of sheets at BOLL&branch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply.